The total value of this contract is over 4 times more than the value of the 2019 contract. That is huge.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We've got some great stuff for you today, in particular, the UAW's new tentative agreement at Ford. Really cool stuff happening there. And, you know, this agreement came after the UAW expanded their strike to the 6,800 workers at Stellantis' Sterling Heights assembly plant in Michigan on Monday, which is the Stellantis' most profitable plant, and 5,000 workers at General Motors' Arlington assembly plant in Texas on Tuesday. It also came after the week prior, the UAW struck Ford's Kentucky truck plant, which is responsible for 54% of Ford's profits. And another huge Ford moneymaker is the plant that manufactures the Ford F-150s. And so what they were doing in the stand-up strike by standing up at Sterling Heights in Michigan and the Stellantis' Sterling Heights assembly plant in Michigan and General Motors' Arlington assembly plant in Texas on Monday and Tuesday was basically telegraphing that if Ford didn't meet them where they needed to be, then on Wednesday, the F-150 plant was going out. And so that is, and that's what Fain said in his live stream earlier in the week. He said that Ford knew what was coming for them on Wednesday if we didn't get a deal. And so Ford was highly motivated to get a deal because after the Kentucky truck plant was taken out, if you take out the Ford F-150 plant, you are really cutting into Ford's operations and their ability to maintain a profit. And so, they're... And you know, this is huge. The strategy is hugely responsible for them being able to get what they got here at Ford. And you know, we're never going to see, obviously, recantations by the extremely silly people who were saying that this strike strategy was not radical enough, or that they knew better how to conduct a strike because they have YouTube shows and have never been in a union in their life, much less been in contract negotiations, much less asked their coworkers to go on strike, right? But still, for people that were listening to them, it's definitely worth, taking a look at what they want in this tentative agreement and how they want it, because by telegraphing, that this is what's next for you, Ford, if you don't meet us where you need to meet us on Wednesday, they were only able to do that because they were striking all three at once, but they weren't striking all three at once. So they were able to play the companies against each other exactly like the companies have been playing workers against each other for decades. And you know that this is an effective strategy because the CEOs have been going absolutely nuts in the business press talking about how unfair it is to play these companies off of each other when they need to be united against the non-union automakers. And, but this is what companies have been doing to workers for decades. They've been whipsawing us. They've been whipsawing us in union strongholds versus other union strongholds, saying, okay, this union local here in Michigan, they accepted this. And so that's why here in New York, you've got to accept this. They've been doing that inside of the country with union plants versus non-union plants, saying to union plants, look, if you don't accept this, then we're going to have to open a non-union plant and take all of our production over there instead of working here. And they've been doing that with plants in the United States and plants outside of the United States, saying, look, if you can't do it for this much here, then we'll go to Mexico where we can do it for dollars a day. And that is also the importance of not only ending tiers in the United States, but also ending tiers internationally. And I am very, very hopeful that that will be a big project of the UAW moving forward after this strike is over. Specifically, getting wages internationally closer to what we have in Western countries, in European and the United States manufacturing centers. So anyway, let's talk about that tentative agreement that they won at Ford. Oh, but also one more exposition before we get into the details of the agreement. The press has been reporting this agreement much more cautiously than they have with any other tentative agreement that I have ever seen in my life. And I like that. And that is because of the way that Shawn Fain has presented this, right? Like, so basically in every other union, when they get a tentative agreement, you know, they're really, really pushing it. Ratification is more or less a foregone conclusion, and that's how the union reports it to the press. And because there are no labor reporters in the press anymore, the press basically takes the press release and reprints it and says, okay, well, this is what it is. The issue is over now. And that's not what Shawn Fain did in his live stream last week. He said that, you know, this is what we have in this agreement, but he repeatedly reiterated that the membership has the final word on whether this is enough. Repeatedly emphasizing that point, that the membership is the highest authority in the union and they have the power to vote this agreement up or down. And that's huge. And that's true in the UAW, and it's true in any other contract negotiations. But the leadership in many other unions, most other unions, do not emphasize that point like Shawn Fain did, giving the members, like, underlining for the members that they have the autonomy to decide whether this is enough. And I really love that. And because of that, the business press has been reporting it much more cautiously. I even saw one headline, I think in the Washington Post or the New York Times, that said Ford has a tentative agreement with the UAW. Tentative is the key word. And so that's, you know, really great to see that kind of language recognizing the autonomy that the members have and the democracy in the negotiation process. Really, really love that. And so this is the first step in ratifying this agreement. They have reached a tentative agreement at the bargaining table. The next step is that the UAW's National Ford Council is going to vote on whether to send the tentative agreement to the membership, right? So this is basically a preliminary vote saying, like, does the National Ford Council think this is enough? If the National Ford Council doesn't think it's enough, then it's not worth sending down to the membership, and they're going to go back to the negotiating table. But assuming that the Ford Council approves it, then the next step is that on Sunday night, Shawn Fain said that they're going to be having a Facebook live stream to review the tentative agreement and publicly, and giving a highlighter that will be published online, and a change pages or a white book will be published online. And that's basically the contract, and everywhere that there are changes to the contract. So the changes will be marked out and the new language will be put in the white book. The fourth step is going to be regional meetings to walk through the tentative agreement with local leaders. And then the fifth step is that locals will hold informational meetings to review and discuss tentative agreement and then hold ratification votes. So very clearly laying out their democratic ratification bonus, and much that rhetoric is very, very, very welcome as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about what they won in this contract. The total value of this contract is over 4 times more than the value of the 2019 contract. That is huge. Additionally, in this contract, there are more in raises than the past 22 years combined. So really, really big movement here. And so specifically in this contract, the general wage increase is 25%. The All wage increases from 2001 to 2022 were only 23%. So there's going to be more movement in the next 4 years on wages than there were over the past 20 years. In addition to the general wage increase, like we have repeatedly informed everybody on the shows, they won the 2009 Ford COLA formula back. And so, with estimates of inflation, the expectation is, once you factor COLA in, that the total wage increase is going to be 33% after COLA. So 25% general wage increase, 33% after COLA. So really, really big gains there. The top wage will increase about 33% through the 2023 agreement, through the end of the agreement. It's going to end in 2027. It's a 4-year agreement. The starting wage will increase by about 68%. They were able to take the progression down from 8 or 9 years to 3, which is something that the UAW has not had since the 90s. A 3-year progression. So you're going to be starting 68% higher than you would have and getting to 33% higher than the previous ceiling in less than half the time. So really, really huge movement. Current temporary employees at Ford will get a 150% raise through the 2023 agreement. They're going to be making more than double what they make now by 2027. Some workers at Sterling Axle and Rawsonville, which is their parts distribution centers, will be seeing up to an 85% raise immediately. Immediately on ratification. Because of how they had, remember, the parts distribution centers at Ford, GM, and Stellantis were basically on a second tier of employment where, you know, they were making $20 an hour, where the assembly plant workers were making like $30-something an hour. And so they've eliminated that tier. Parts distribution centers at Ford are now on the assembly plant schedule. And so with that, the lowest paid workers at these parts distribution centers are going to be seeing an 85% raise immediately. I mean, imagine almost doubling your salary overnight. That's what the UAW has done for these people at Ford. They, like I said, won back 3-year wage progression, the 2009 COLA formula, and ending tiers. Since they launched the stand-up strike, Ford's offer has increased in value by 50%. They also won the right to strike over plant closures, which is totally unheard of. I don't think that the UAW has ever had an agreement like that in a contract with Ford. And what that means is a right to strike over plant closures. That means that over the course of this agreement, if Ford tries to outsource any of their production from the United States to other countries, or just to close a plant indefinitely, then the UAW is going to have the right to strike over that, to put pressure on the company to not follow through with that decision. Unions have not had that amount of power written in black and white in a union contract, I don't think ever. That is a huge, huge concession from Ford. I mean, and you know, if you know anything about unions or collective bargaining, or you've been part of the collective bargaining process, the no strike clause is basically treated as sacrosanct. It is not, it's just taken for granted. There's not even really any discussion about it. It's just, okay, you know, we agree not to lock you out over the course of this contract, and you agree not to strike. And so them getting this back, huge, absolutely huge. There's also going to be a $5,000 signing bonus. And in addition to the signing bonus, there reportedly talks that there's going to be some amount of compensation on top of that for workers that have been on strike. Presumably not a one-to-one, like a dollar for dollar, what they would have made if they had been working, but really any amount of compensation for having been on strike is another enormous, enormous concession on the part of Ford, and a really big win from for the UAW. So we are really, really excited to see that.
Jacob, I know that the details are still coming out on the agreement, and I believe you mentioned that tomorrow night is when we're going to get a lot more information.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know much about the retirees?
They did say, they were not specific, but they did say that that there will be increases to current retiree contributions, increases to 401k contributions, and I think they said there were going to be increases to pension payouts for folks that are for folks currently working when they retire. So so they were not super specific about the changes to the retirement plans, but they did say that there had been movement.
Right. And yeah, I just know, particularly here in Alabama, we have a lot of retired UAW members. And so just curious if, what we know right now. And of course, there's just a lot more to find out. So it's going to be interesting to see the full details, but a lot of big wins already. And, we'll see how the membership feels about it. And we'll also see what happens with GM and Stellantis if they start to follow suit. But, those numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on, I think I saw a question in the chat about whether or not they're going to be working, and they are going to be returning to work at Ford during the tentative agreement ratification process. And that's another benefit of the kind of stand-up strike strategy, is because this is going to put even more pressure on GM and Stellantis to come to a deal, because the last thing that they want is for Ford's operations to be up and running while the UAW is still striking GM and Stellantis. So a lot of flexibility and a lot of, a lot of wins at Ford
right.
by the UAW.
Right. And one thing I think it's worth just remembering for folks, especially, if you're listening to this and you're not a union member, I hope it's worth pulling out, like, the fact that the members get to vote on this agreement, right? The members have the final say. And collective bargaining is not a perfect process by any means, but compared to the alternative where you don't have any formal input into your wages and working conditions and benefits, the ability to have folks, to have input into folks negotiating, and then the ability to vote on that agreement up or down, I think that is just a taste of democracy in the workplace that really is something that all workers should have the opportunity to enjoy. And it's something that is a clear union advantage and union difference.
Yep.
And I think there are probably auto workers all over the area, including right here in North Alabama, who are seeing this and listening to this and wondering, how they can get in on it, and how they could actually, benefit from these sort of gains as well.
Yep, and it's absolutely within the power of the workers at these non-union automakers. They absolutely can get what the UAW has won at Ford and GM, because and this is something that that people just don't think about anymore. Well, it had been when I was growing up. It kind of had been taken for granted that plant work, manufacturing work was a career. That was a good job. That was a good paying middle class job. And that is becoming less and less taken for granted. It was taken for granted because of the labor movement. The manufacturing jobs, production jobs, were not always good career middle class jobs.
Absolutely
not. They were, in fact, some of the worst, most transient employment, temporary work, bottom of the barrel jobs that you could get before the unions came in and transformed them into real good paying jobs that could sustain a family. And the reason that is less and less being taken for granted is because the corporations that have high union density have been fighting their unions for the past 4 or 5 decades and really taking back a lot of the things that unions have won. And there have been a lot of foreign non-union manufacturing companies come into the United States and have been fighting unions tooth and nail since they got here, so that they could continue a bottom-of-the-barrel employment approach. And so if we want to see manufacturing jobs being able to be taken for granted as a good-paying occupation again, then we're going to have to see a resurgence of unionization in the manufacturing sector. And the hope is, and I think there's a reasonable expectation that that's going to be led by the UAW. Shawn Fain has said in one of his live streams that that is his plan. That we're going to win record contracts at the big three. We are going to organize in non-union automakers like we never have before, and so that's been explicitly laid out by the union as a strategy, and so. There is every reason to expect that that's what's going to happen, and there's every reason to believe. There's every reason to know for a fact that workers have the capability to turn this profession into a good-paying middle-class profession again, because it used to be. And it can be again. Obviously, there's going to need to be some attention paid to the law, to the ability of companies to outsource and import goods made by bottom of the barrel, race to the bottom, exploitative conditions. But there's a lot of things that that can be done immediately to make these jobs better.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.